Welcome to another video from Demystifying Proposals. Our mission is to break down the proposal process and make proposals make sense. In this video, we touch on the best practices for writing compliant and compelling proposals, obviously one of the most important aspects of proposal management. If you learned something from this video, please hit the thumbs up to like the video. Subscribe to our channel and click on the bell to be notified of future videos. If you'd like, leave a comment as well. One of the first things to know about proposal writing is that it's a different kind of writing. Writing for proposals can be different than just about any other kind of writing. It's sort of like program reporting, except for that you need to be compliant and compelling. It's sort of like writing a term paper, except you're going to be very limited in what you can say, and usually in how much space you have to say it. It's sort of like marketing, except for that you have to use the RFP's language and follow the statement of work. This presentation will offer the basics of how to write a proposal, but every proposal is different. So if you're writing a grant, the idea or the purpose is to persuade a patron to give up their money to support a cause. You use a narrative, you tailor the description to the idea of interest for the particular funder, often making some appeal to the value that you bring to the organization. For creative writing, the purpose is to entertain or educate the reader. Some organizational elements or structure is, either it's created from your imagination or it's based on factual stories or of events and people. The main characters are usually the protagonist, often a hero, and an antagonist, usually the villain, and the characters need not be human. Federal proposal writing, on the other hand, the purpose of which is to win the proposal, has to be compliant in accordance with the FAR or the Federal Acquisition Regulations, and a more compelling proposal than all of the other competitors. So we use these terms a lot in proposal management: compliance and compelling. And here are some definitions, but we do have trainings about how to develop a compliant proposal and how to develop a compelling proposal if you need to dive in further. So compliance means that you're answering the request for proposal or whatever the solicitation type is, meaning that you're looking at the requirements and you're using a proposal outline that's structured based on the proposal instructions or section L and the evaluation criteria or section M, and then the statement of work or the performance work statement, which is usually found in section C. You want to do all of those things to ease the government's evaluation. So if the customer initially asked you to give A, B, and C, then you should give the customer A, B, and C, no more, no less, no substitutions. Not A and B, and we think the customer really meant D, so let's substitute D for C. Not A, we can only kind of sort of do B, so let's offer E as well to sweeten the deal. And C, not A, B, C, and Q, just because it will make the customer happy, nor any other weird letter combination or permutation other than A, B, and C. The Shipley Associates metric for a compliance proposal usually gets you a win rate of 5 to 10%, unless the customer really knows, likes, and will forgive you. Compelling means you persuade the customer to select your company to perform the work over all other competitors. You do this with good writing and graphics. Good writing means you answer the specific RFP requirements and defend your claims with supporting proof or evidence. By defending your claims, we mean to clearly state the claim, what you're trying to prove at the beginning. Then define any controversial or ambiguous terms so that readers understand exactly what you mean. Or better yet, replace those words with what you clearly mean to say and can support. Avoid cliches like raise the bar or cutting edge or best of breed, best in class, world class. These are hard to define and they're hard to defend. So just avoid using them to the best of your ability. Do include evidence or compelling proof ideally quantified information. So facts, statistics, customer accolades, awards, quality and performance targets met, industry trade studies, cost schedule savings. You get the idea. If you have a CPARs or you have program management reviews or award fee debriefs, these are all good things to be able to include in your proposal. Using multiple types of evidence leads credibility to your claim and is much more compelling than those who would only use past performance proof points. Here are some examples of how bad writing loses proposals. A failure to follow the RFP structure and instructions, i.e. compliance, means that you're not using the outline provided with references to M and C and L. It's very important to make it clear to the evaluators where to find the information they're looking for. Another example might be failure to focus on the customer's business problem. Write the statement of work or the performance work statement as provided. Section C is what the customer is telling you they want you to do. Another example might be a lack of clear differentiation. You need to convince the customer why they should select you. Explain how your solution will improve the customer's business and how this improvement will be measured. Another example might be that key points are buried in your proposal. We use call-out boxes and other eye-catching elements to make your points noticeable. And then lastly, how bad writing could lose you the proposal is if the proposal is difficult to read. Avoid jargon or language that's too technical. Don't assume the evaluators are familiar with the tools and technology. Eliminate misspellings, grammar errors, inconsistent formats, and inaccuracies. Make your proposal clean and easy to read. In this section, we'll talk about how proposals fit into the business development lifecycle, because everybody who's writing to a proposal needs to understand how proposals fit into how their company develops new business. One of the things that it's key to understand is the proposals are built over time, and they're based on reviews. The proposal manager will supply an outline that's compliant to the RFP. You must use this as your guide. You aren't expected to sit down and write amazing prose. If you can do that, great. If you can't, the proposal manager will work with you. But proposals are iterative and they go through lots of phases. Each draft builds on the last one. So each phase is reviewed to see how compliant, responsive, and compelling the draft is. And there's a different level of detail expected at each phase. This is what we mean when we talk about building a proposal. We're not going to go into lots of detail about the proposal schedule. Again, we have a training that's all about proposal schedules and the way you manage them. But this is a typical proposal schedule that assumes a 30-day turn. Your first day is the day the RFP drops. Your last day, day 30, is when the proposal needs to be submitted. And as you can see from this graphic, there's a lot of things that have to be done between 1 and 30. And 30 days isn't a whole lot of time to get a whole lot done. So you need to be paying attention if you're working on a proposal. If you're writing a proposal, understand all of these elements and how you fit into the process. So as we mentioned, there are those reviews, and we call them color team reviews, which is based on a Shipley Associates process for managing proposals. Most government contractors follow some iteration of this process. The specifics of what a pink team definition and a red team definition, gold team and white glove are maybe slightly different than what this slide presents, but this will give you an idea of what we mean when we talk about color team reviews and we talk about building a proposal. So at Pink Team, we're looking for 80% content developed. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have written 80% of your content. What we're looking for is an outline for every requirement, and then hopefully some of the details of that outline have been filled in. We want you to start thinking about what you're going to be using as proof points. We want you to start thinking about what graphics you might want to incorporate. This is all what we do at Pink Team. At Red Team, we're getting closer to final content, usually about 90%. Some companies might make it 80%. But you want to have your graphics pretty done. You want to have your tables pretty done. The Red Team document should look an awful lot like what the final proposal is going to look like for the reviewers to evaluate against those evaluation criteria that are in the RFP. When you get to Gold Team and White Glove, the number of reviewers in the process usually gets very skinny down to the folks who have the most vested interest, the capture manager, the proposal manager, the business lead for that particular line of business. And the Gold Team is about a 95% complete document. It's really almost done. There should be very little things that need to be completed at this point in the process. Because Gold Team usually happens, as you saw on that schedule a couple of slides ago, very close to the end of the process. You don't have a lot of time. White Glove is a 100% complete proposal. The purpose of White Glove is really just to review the document to ensure that it's clean. There are no typos. There's all the language is very easy to follow, and the graphics are final. You should not be making changes at White Glove. So you've been asked to be a writer on a proposal. What should you do? Well, there's a lot to keep in mind. First, here are some suggestions about how to get up to speed. If there's a pre-RFP, like you're in the pre-RFP phase and the RFP hasn't come out yet, then participate in brainstorming sessions, do help with client research, do some early proposal drafts. After the RFP comes out, attend the proposal kickoff meeting and attend solution sessions or color review meetings. Make sure that every element of the RFP is being addressed. Compliance requires you to speak to every element of the RFP. The outline you've been given will indicate the level at which you should be writing, but remember to use the RFP's language for common terms, not your own. Before you start writing, you should have three things. You should have an outline from the proposal manager, and hopefully that includes page limits for the sections that you're going to be writing. You should have the RFP itself, including sections C, L, and M, most importantly. And you should have capture briefings or proposal in briefs that describe the solution, the features and benefits of the solution, the win themes and hot buttons that you're trying to incorporate into your proposal, any discriminators your company might have, and the proof points and past performance that you're planning to put in your proposal. You want to familiarize yourself with all of these documents before you even start writing. If you don't have any of these things, or if you have questions, the proposal manager and the capture manager are there to answer your questions. Do not be afraid to ask questions. One of the other things that's a little odd about the proposal process is that this is how the government scores proposals. Now, in section M, the evaluation criteria, they'll tell you what kind of score they're going to give. High confidence, low confidence, highly relevant, somewhat relevant. There's all different kinds of ways that they list the evaluation criteria. But when it comes down to it, what they really do is they find strengths. And a strength is any element of the proposal that the government views as a positive. Things that will ensure successful contract performance. They can be strengths or significant strengths. Weaknesses is any element of the proposal that the government views as a negative or a risk. And again, those can be weaknesses or they can be significant weaknesses. A deficiency is a material failure of the proposal to meet a government requirement or a combination of significant weaknesses that increases the risk of an unsuccessful contract performance. So deficiencies are very challenging and almost never can be overcome. If you have a deficiency in your proposal, you're probably not going to win the contract. If you have significant weaknesses, they might be overcome by significant strengths. So what you're really trying to do is make the government see where your strengths are, particularly your significant strengths, and minimize the number of weaknesses or risks that might be seen in your proposal. Again, like the color reviews, this is just a slide to sort of familiarize you with the proposal process. In this case, as we've been discussing, there are a lot of sections in a proposal, but the most important sections from the writer's perspective are L and M and C. The instructions to the offerers, that is how the proposal is supposed to be constructed. The evaluation criteria, that is how the government is going to evaluate the proposal. And the statement of work or the performance work statement, what the government is asking contractors to do. Now, Section L, or the proposal instructions, will have a lot of information in it. It'll have the submission instructions, whether you're doing an email submission, a hard copy submission, or having to use a portal. It'll have page limits and font sizes. It'll have the names of the volumes and the sections. Usually there's technical and management at a minimum. Sometimes there's staffing, sometimes resumes are also to be included, often in an appendix. And resumes are often very page limited, so only 2 or 3 pages a piece. And then sometimes past performances is its own section. Sometimes past performances is part of management. And again, past performances are often very limited in the number of pages that you can include. And then there's that whole other volume, which is the business cost, price, volume. The name varies. It depends on the procurement. That section is usually not page limited. And then sometimes the government asks for terms and conditions, and sometimes they ask for organizational conflict of interest. So these are just some of the examples of the volumes and sections that might be found in Section L. Section C, as I said, is usually the statement of work, or sometimes it's the performance work statement. So what does the customer need done? Usually they're broken down by task areas, and it needs to be incorporated in the technical volume somewhere, but it doesn't always say exactly where they want you to address the statement of work in the instructions. So sometimes that's something that it can be tricky. But most of the time, most of the proposal instructions will say, and we want to understand your response to the statement of work here. And that makes it easy. Section M is the evaluation criteria. Like, how are they going to evaluate the proposal? There's going to be a group of people, they're going to read your proposal, and this is going to be their score sheet. Do they think your proposal is highly relevant? Do they think your past performance gives them confidence? These are the kinds of questions that the evaluation criteria will tell you. And sometimes the evaluation criteria will also tell you which sections are most important or highly rated. Sometimes they say something like technical is more important than management, management is more important than past performance, and all of those sections are more important than price. So that tells you that the technical section is the most important section, followed by management, followed by past performance, and therefore you should allocate most of your page count to your technical approach, and then some to management, obviously, and then past performance. Prices will be its own animal, and you'll do price as the instructions tell you to do it. But sometimes the evaluation criteria say management is the most important. And in that case, you need to make sure that the management section A comes first and B is allocated the most number of pages. So digging in deeper, this is what goes into the different sections. So a little bit of a pause here. One of the things that we always say when we're talking about proposals is that people need to remember that proposals are scored. They're not read. And what we mean by that is that the government has its evaluation criteria, the government has its strengths and weaknesses criteria, and that's what they're going to use to score your proposal. They're not going to say this proposal reads the best and they're going to be convinced by that. They're going to use their score sheets. So that's what we mean by proposals are scored and not read. So a good proposal is laid out in the same order as the proposal instructions and incorporates the evaluation criteria from section M. If there are elements in L that aren't in M, they still have to be included. If there are elements in M that are not in L, they have to be added. And then you need to address all the tasks in the statement of work or the performance work statement. And this can be particularly challenging if your proposal is so page limited that the number of pages they've actually given you to respond to the technical approach is less than the number of pages that the statement of work or the performance work statement takes up in the RFP. I'd like to say that that doesn't happen very often, but in reality, it does. So one of the big things that you're going to have to figure out is how you're going to write to all of the tasks in fewer pages than the government wrote to all of the tasks. It's fun. And then the last thing and the most important thing you need to do, because it's what makes your proposal responsive and compelling, is what are the benefits of your solutions features? What are your win themes and discriminators? And do they come through in your writing? So the basic outline of a technical approach is for each task, an understanding. What is the customer asking for and why? An approach. What are you going to do for the customer and how? That how is really important. And then proof points. Where have you done this kind of work before? You don't have to have a proof point for every step in your approach, but you're going to need some proof points to shore up that your approach has been done before and you know how to do it. Don't forget to include graphics. So technical diagrams, process flows, there's all different kinds of ways to include graphics. And by graphics, we also mean not only pictures, but tables. So think about tables as well. So the understanding section usually reflects responsiveness. This means, why is the customer asking for this work? What problems are they trying to solve? And what are the customer's hot buttons? And how can you tie your solution to their vision and their mission? These are what we call soft requirements. Win themes may come from your understanding, and especially if you have something unique to say. And think about a call-out box to emphasize a win theme. So within the technical approach, like I said, we'll have an approach section for each task. So for each task, you need to explain how you're going to do the work. Step 1, step 2, step 3. What's your methodology? What are your tools? What are your techniques? What are your procedures? What are your processes to do the work? This is what addresses the hard requirements of the RFP. Usually you're bidding on an RFP that's similar to work you're already doing. So find the proposal for that similar work, or find the statement of work or the program reporting for that similar work. It'll help you with understanding how that work gets done. Or find someone who's done this work before if you haven't. Remember to use these things to craft your approach to the new work. Don't just copy and paste, because the inputs have to match this RFP, this customer. Proof points are whatever you can say to support your understanding and approach and show the evaluators you know what you're talking about. Where have you done it before? And then don't forget the so what. What did you learn from your previous work? And did you get kudos from the customer? How does that solution and program match the approach you're bringing to this proposal? That's what makes a proposal compelling. Proof points often are found again as call-out boxes to draw attention to the great work that you've already done. Graphics can be a great way to make your approach clear. You can have an operational view 1 where you show the entire solution at a high level in one graphic from an operational perspective. Or you might have a system view 1 where you show the technical solution in one graphic. This is particularly true for an IT type proposal where you lay out how all of the parts and pieces of your solution flow from one to the other. How does the information flow in your solution? That might be a system view. Or you might just have simple process flows that show how information gets from one place to another. So here we give an example of a technical approach requirement and some potential content that you might write to answer those requirements. So if the RFP requirement is to provide laptops across the customer's enterprise, you might describe how you find out what configuration is best for each department by doing research on the customer's needs or surveying the workforce or other methods to know what kind of laptop would be needed by each department. The needs are probably going to be different. So maybe you develop a survey on users' needs for the laptop. Maybe you get that survey approved by the customer, then you administer it, then you compile the results by department, then you evaluate them for consistency across the results, and then you develop a configuration for each department. That might be your approach to how you would find out what each department needs. Then you might talk about relationships you might have with companies that sell laptops so that whatever kind of laptop is needed, maybe you can get that really easily because you don't know how the government is necessarily going to be procuring this information. So that might include a discussion of how long you anticipate it might take to procure the laptops, especially if you think that you're going to be faster than other companies. And then to support your assertions that you know how to do the research and how to procure the laptops, you would give examples of where you've done this work for customers. That you, for example, were able to determine through your survey for one customer that the IT department needed very different laptops than the accounting department, which is probably true. And then you were able for another customer or the same customer to get the laptops needed in a short period of time, allowing the customer to succeed in getting something critical done. That's an example of proof points that you would want to include in your proposal. Moving on to the management approach, the basic outline for a management section depends on the RFP instructions, but usually it includes things like program management. How do you manage programs generally? Do you use CMMI? Do you use PMBOK? What do you use? And staffing. Who are you proposing to do the work and why are they the right people? And then I always remind people the graphics are good for this section too. You can maybe have an organizational chart. You might have process flows. You definitely will have some kind of table or something that talks about your staffing. So think about those things as you're drafting your approach. So digging down deeper into program management, you need to explain how you will manage the project. Much like the technical approach, the management approach should include steps you take to manage a proposal. So, like I said, do you use PMBOK? Do you use CMMI? What's your process flow for managing a program? Usually, that also ends up being a little bit of a proof point because you want to, if you have a standard method that they'll be familiar with, like PMBOK or CMMI, you want to make sure that they're aware that you know how to do this and you've done it before and it's been assessed and all of those kinds of things. Do you have a quality assurance process? Again, maybe you have an ISO certificate for your quality assurance process. That's something that you would want to be able to call out. And if you have different teams as part of your program management, how are they going to be managed? And is that information going to roll up into a centralized repository of information? Often there is a task in the statement of work on program management. It's often task one. I just want you to know that this is not the same as how you would manage your team. But the two sections definitely have to reflect the same information. But task one, program management of the statement of work, is how you're going to manage the work from the for the government, right? How you're going to manage it from a government's perspective. Program management in the management section is how you're going to manage your team, which obviously means that you interact with the government, but it's really about how you manage your team, the people that you're bringing to this process. Most companies have a management approach that they can tailor for their proposal, so be sure to ask your proposal manager for that. And then don't forget that how you manage a firm fixed price contract should be different than how you manage a time and materials contract or a cost-plus contract. Your management approach should reflect the contract type, which is in Section B of the RFP. So the next section that often comes in management approach is staffing. Most proposals require key personnel, and the requirements for key personnel are usually found in Section C and Section H. Now, the requirements in Section C and Section H may not match, and if they don't, that's something that you should definitely ask about in your questions. Also, make sure your key personnel meet all of the requirements specified in Section C and Section H. And make sure that their resumes, the ones that you submit with your proposal, reflect that information too. If there's a requirement that somebody has a PMP, that better be in the resume. If there is a requirement that they have a certain kind of technical training, that better be in the resume. And if you can't meet all of the requirements, if your key personnel don't meet all of the requirements that have been specified, then you consider asking a question. But remember, questions get answered publicly, and you may get an answer you don't like. So be careful about asking questions if your key personnel don't meet the requirements that have been specified. Most proposals require an explanation also of the proposed staffing. That is, how many people are you proposing and in what labor categories? So again, like your program management section, your proposed staffing should reflect the contract type, right? You're going to staff differently for a firm fixed price contract than you are going to for a cost plus or T&M contract. So if the RFP doesn't include hours for each labor category, you may have to explain what your staffing mix is and why. So think about that as you're putting together your staffing, and think about how you're going to explain it in your staffing section. Don't forget to revisit your staffing section after you finish the proposal pricing, because your price to win is probably going to affect your staffing. As I said initially, past performance is usually very page limited. Often you're only allowed 2 or 3 pages per past performance. Sometimes it's even only 1 page per past performance. So you need to make sure that you tailor your past performance for each bid to show how the work that you've done is similar to the work being requested. And the easiest way to do that is to use the statement of work or the performance work statement to map the past performance work to the proposed work, usually included as an intro or in the description. So SAL task 1 is asking the company to provide program management, including X, Y, and Z. Then you write in your past performance, we provided program management in this task, including X, Y, and Z. Got it? If your past performance doesn't cover all of the statement of work requirements, you have to cover as many as you can. Ideally, you cover them all. Not every past performance covers every aspect of the statement of work, but across all of your past performances, you should cover all of the elements of the statement of work, because you want the government to get the confirmation that you do know how to do all of these things from previous work. Remember, the government can contact whoever you list as the point of contact for those past performances. So you can't stretch the truth too much. Also, make sure that you talk to the program manager, the internal program manager, the company program manager for each of the past performances, to make sure that the customer would give a good report, even if it's not required to do so, and to make sure that everything you're saying about their program is in fact verifiable, true, whatever the right words you want to use are. Remember, the government talks to each other. So even if they don't ask you to do a past performance questionnaire with your particular contact, they may or may not pick up the phone and call them. Resumes like past performance are often very limited, but resumes like past performance also have to be tailored to each bid to show how the person being bid meets the requirements of the position. So use the section L, M, and C requirements, sometimes section H too, to show that the person being bid meets or preferably exceeds the requirements. Use the statement of work and the performance work statement to show how the work this person has done is similar to the work being proposed. Like the past performance, you want to try and cover all of the statement of work requirements in a resume, particularly for key personnel. If you can't cover them all, cover as many as you can. Color teams. Okay, here we're going to break down what you need to do as a writer for each of the color team reviews. We're going to start with pink team. So for pink team, you're drafting. You want to use the products from Capture, as I said. You want to use any briefs on win themes and discriminators or Capture documents to create your drafts. Remember, compliant, responsive, compelling. Again, you want to write to every element of the outline, but not every section has to be written 100% complete. 80% is what you're aiming for. Again, if you don't know answers to your questions, ask. We do not believe in stupid questions in proposal management. Also, a reminder that meeting deadlines is critical to the proposal development process. If you're not going to be able to meet a deadline, you have to let the proposal manager know as soon as you know. First and foremost, the thing that you have to do is compliance. The outline will have been created to be compliant. Therefore, you cannot rearrange sections to, quote, tell a better story. The evaluators will be expecting to see the sections in the order of L and M. Also, be sure to use the correct font, the font that's required by the RFP, the font that's in the outline. Otherwise, you will not know if you're near page count. And then also use the RFP's terms. If they call it a program, call it a program. If they call it a project, even if it's gigantic, call it a project. If they use life cycle as one word, spell life cycle as one word. If they use life cycle as 2 words, use 2 words. Okay? It's very important. You want them to feel like you've been paying attention. The requirements will be different for each proposal. However, hopefully you'll have lots of previous examples of sections in a boilerplate directory. Leverage them. After the reviewers have done their thing, there'll be a pink team debrief. What you need to do as a writer is listen to the pink team reviewers. Ask questions if you don't understand something, but don't be defensive about your writing. It's the reviewer's job to question everything. It's the reviewer's job to behave like the government evaluators, and they don't know you from a hole in the wall. So they're not going to understand all of those things that internally maybe you understand. So review that slide again on how the government evaluates proposals, strengths, weaknesses, and deficiencies. And remember that the evaluators, the government evaluators, are going to read a lot of proposals. And they're looking for excuses. They're looking for negatives to make their job easier, to kick companies out. This is why we harp on compliance. It's the first thing they check. Non-compliant proposals don't get reviewed any further. And this is why you have to have everything in the same order as section L and M to make it easy for the evaluators. And this is why you use call-out boxes and other things that draw their attention. We want to make it as easy as possible for the evaluators to do their evaluation and find the nuggets that we want them to find. Immediately after pink team, review the comments from the pink team reviewers. Your job as a writer is to adjudicate the comments. You need to look at them and you need to decide, is this something that, yes, I can incorporate, or no, I can't incorporate it for whatever reason. If you have a good reason not to incorporate a comment, you need to talk that over with the proposal manager and the capture manager. They need to sign off on the fact that you're not going to be incorporating a comment. You can't just not include it because you don't feel like it. It has to be addressed as a group because the same people who reviewed at pink team are likely going to review at red team, and they're going to ask questions about where that comment wasn't incorporated. So everybody has to be able to answer that question. You might need to find some other SMEs because there may be questions that they ask you as a reviewer that you don't know the answers to. And don't forget to block time off on your calendar to write and recover. Remember, it always takes longer to write than you think it's going to. You remember term papers when you were in college? Remember that. So the stages for the red team are pretty much the same as the stages for the pink team. You're going to prep for the red team, very similar to what you did for the pink team, except for now you need about 90% complete drafts. Make sure you use the pink team draft to start your writing again. Do not use what you submitted because the document was likely edited and formatted for pink team. Get the document from the proposal manager. Also, remember, always compliant, responsive, compelling. The instructions for the debrief are pretty much the same as they were, right? So again, listen to the red team reviewers. They are likely the same people as the pink team. Maybe they added a few more people because the document's more complete. They may need more people. And remember that the reviewer is putting on their government hat. They're pretending they're the government and they're pretending that they know nothing about this company. So they may ask you questions that seem like they're stupid. They're not stupid. It means that they don't understand something. If they didn't work at the company, there's something that they don't understand. So just think about it from that perspective. Immediately after red team, the number of authors often gets reduced. This is not intended as an insult to those who get left behind. It's that publishing works better with fewer hands. And we need to get the story into a cohesive whole. And that's easier to do with fewer people writing. So for those who still have assignments after red team, you do the same things as you did after pink team. You adjudicate the comments. If there's a comment that you don't think you're going to be able to address or you don't think is right to address, talk it over with the proposal manager and the capture manager. Reach out to other SMEs, block off time on your calendar to write. So the process for gold team is very much like it was for pink team and what it was for red team. We try and keep things very similar in nature as part of the proposal process, proposal development process. But now you should have like 95% complete drafts. There may be some graphics being tweaked. There may be some very small holes in sections. Your section should be a page count, right? So again, use the right font, use the right styles so that your section, you can tell where you are relative to page count. As a reminder, do not use the draft that you submitted for red team to write your gold team. Get the red team, what the red team did, that document from the proposal manager. It's probably in SharePoint somewhere, and then use that for your gold team drafts. If you don't know the answers to questions, please ask. If you can't find that red team document, ask. If you don't know whether your sections are a page count, ask. That's what the proposal manager is for. So you may remember when we were talking about the overall definitions of the color team reviews, we talked about at gold team and white glove, the number of people doing reviews gets skinnied down, just like the number of authors gets skinnied down when you get to gold team. Usually the document at this point is only reviewed by the capture manager, the proposal manager, whoever is in charge of the business line, whether that's an SVP, a VP, whatever, and maybe one or two other people, because you do not have time for major rework. And hopefully, if your red team went reasonably well, there's not a need for a major rework. After gold team, the proposal manager will take control of the document to finalize it for white glove. Writers are no longer involved. The proposal manager may still reach out for questions, but hopefully they're few and far between. So as a writer, you are probably not going to the white glove. The white glove is usually limited to the capture manager, the proposal manager, the SVP of the business line, and maybe one or two other people, similar to the gold team, maybe even fewer people than the gold team. And there's no rework done at this stage. We are just verifying the changes from Gold Team got included, including any compliance things. After White Glove, the documents should be ready to be submitted. So congratulations, you now know everything you ever needed to know about how to write a proposal. But if you're interested, we have an exercise. It's silly, it's simple, but it hopefully will give you an idea of how to write for proposals in sort of a more quote unquote real world environment. So for any writing exercise, hopefully what you have is section C, the statement of work, section, the win themes and discriminators, the proof points and past performance. This is what you're going to write to if you're writing the technical approach. And we're just taking our writing exercises, the technical approach. So here's what we're giving you. Section C requirement is you're writing for the Customs and Border Patrol. This is the Customs and Border Patrol bid. CBP is Customs and Border Patrol. They're asking you to build an ARC. For FEMA, FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And that ARC needs to be able to survive a flood and rescue 100 animals and 50 people. Your win theme and discriminator from your company is that your ARCs are teak, so they last a really long time. Your proof point or past performance is that you built an ARC for NOAA, and they used it to rescue people and animals during the flooding that occurred during Hurricane Harvey. Obviously, this is not a real RFP requirement. So in this case, as I said, since we're writing a draft that's a technical approach, what's our understanding and our approach? What are the features of your approach? What are the benefits of your approach? How might your approach differ from that of your competitors? What are your win themes and discriminators? You need to weave those into the paragraph. What are your proof points? You need to add those as well. All of those things go into writing a draft. So when you're writing your approach, how are you actually going to do the work? What's the first step? What's the second step? Think about using a whiteboard to come up with the steps and then drive to consensus on how an ARC gets built. If you're developing a technical approach, usually there's more than one person writing the technical approach, and all of you have to be in step with each other. So each of the statement of work tasks has to be aligned. So you might need to drive to some consensus to make sure that everybody understands the whole process beginning to end. And don't forget to take ownership. Who's actually doing the work? There may be somebody different at step 2 than there was at step 1. There may be somebody different in step 5 than there was in step 1. Think about that and take ownership and use active voice. We will do this, not we have done it in the past, right? It's very important to use active voice. Think about whether a graphic would help with the approach. Maybe you want to do that OV1 we talked about, where it's an operational view of the entire process of how an ARC gets built. Or maybe it's a systems view. Wood comes in, it goes here, it gets here, and then in the end, you get an ARC. Think about how a graphic will help describe your approach. Maybe you have a table that has a row for each step of what you will do and how what you will do benefits the customer. So in this writing example, we provided you with a win theme, but in the capture phase of the proposal process, usually there's multiple win themes developed. There's usually not only one. And so you need to, as a writer, think about which theme fits best with your section and then incorporate that win theme into your approach as a differentiator or whatever makes sense. So maybe you add a sentence that uses the win themes, or maybe you add a call out box. Think about how the win theme gets incorporated and make sure that it comes across on the page very clearly to the evaluators. So differentiators are what do you do differently than your competitors? This is based on your knowledge of how your company does things differently. Most companies have things that they claim that they do differently than other companies. If you can, it's always a good idea to incorporate those into your proposal. And think about what you know about another company, how they do things differently. And maybe you can do what we call ghosting, which is explain how your way of doing things might be better than somebody's alternative way of doing things without naming the company. You would never want to name another company in your proposal. Again, we provided the proof points in our example, but if you are working on a proposal, where have you done this work before? What was the benefit to the customer of how you did the work? That's the so what, right? So not only did you do the work, but there was a benefit to the customer in how you did it versus the next guy. Did your solution help with their overall mission? Did your solution do things faster, better, cheaper? There's all kinds of words and languages that you want to do to create proof points. What else do you know as in your section that might help somebody else in their section as a proof point? So don't forget your proof points. It would be good if they marry across. So now we're going to bring it all together. You're going to develop written prose based on all those elements. Don't forget how to write a well-constructed argument. We all learned this in school, right? You have a theme statement. That's your understanding. What's your takeaway? What do you want the government to remember? When they're done reading 20 proposals, what do you want them to remember about your proposal or your section of the proposal? What's your win theme? What's your differentiator? What's your proof point? What's your theme statement? Then, how are you going to do the work? Why is the way you're going to do the work good for the customer? Why should they believe you know what you're doing? Proof points. Active voice. Take ownership. So there are lots of ways that this example paragraph can be finished. This is just one example that we put together. I'm not going to read it. You can read it while it's on the screen, or you can stop the slide at this point. But you'll see that we've described the various stages that we do to build an arc. We've included some proof points. We've included some metrics. Metrics are always great. We're trying to cover our win themes. So the example should, hopefully, you'll be able to see, reflect all of those things we've been asking you to do to be a good proposal writer. We know that proposal writing is very confusing and there's a lot to remember. I hope that this video helped you with some of those details, maybe solidified some things in your mind about how you want to write to proposals. We are demystifying proposals, and as the tagline says, our goal is to make proposals make sense.